All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started. Y'all keep eating. By all means, finish the rest of the food because I'm not taking any of it home with me. That's for sure. Before we start, I have just two housekeeping announcements. One, they wanted me to let you all know that this specific chapel, Marne Chapel, is the home of the Family Life Care Chaplain who provides expert counseling services. So if you're ever in need of something that's maybe different than MFLAC, different from behavioral health, this is a really excellent resource. So that's located here. The food was provided by the Hunter Protestant Chapel service, so they just want to let you know how much they love you guys, and they wanted to be participants in some of the work we're doing here. So with that in mind, we're going to kick it off. Who here has attended one of my Leadership Academy classes before? All right, excellent. So these classes are iterative. They build on one another toward the purpose of expanding a tool set for leaders that the Army expects of you, but doesn't always provide. So if you went to my empathy class, that was the last one we did last quarter, we took a deep dive into how to lead and communicate with empathy. And the reason I did that was not necessarily because I want us all to be Care Bears and hug each other, but because on your OERs and NCOERs, you are graded, you are measured against your peers for your ability to display empathy. Did you know that? But were you ever formally taught by the Army how to do that? I assume no. Some of us have that skill naturally, and some of us have never seen it. And so that's the point of these classes. One of the biggest challenges as a chaplain is chaplains are always asked, "Hey, Chappy, how's morale?" And I'm like, I don't. What does that even mean? I just came from the motor pool and I talked to 3 privates. If I took my evidence based off of them, they're putting a Connex away 5 times in a row. Like, how do you think morale looks compared to that? And how do you measure that? To the express point of how do you fix it? How do you make it better? Big picture wise, the brigade chaplain says that the new brigade commander is very concerned about our unit's drug problem, and everybody needs to be involved in fixing the drug problem. I said to myself, well, what am I gonna do about that? I'm not hanging out in the barracks to, whack the crazy vape pens out of people's hands. I can't do that. But I do think that if we make people like their jobs better, perhaps they'll be less likely to want to risk it. And so that's what we're after. And I have a belief that I am not the best leader in this battalion. I'm not the best carer in this battalion. I'm just the best looking. And so if I am going to expand the amount of caring for soldiers, then I need to kind of train this leadership population. And this class was really designed for that E5, E6, maybe 01, 02, W01 level, that kind of frontline direct leadership level, to how to impact your organization in your little leadership umbrella to make the bubbles of morale rise higher. Okay. So in the maintenance world, we would call this a 10-level maintenance training, right? Caring for your soldier at your direct leadership level, at the 10 level, will stop problems from rising to my 70 or 80 level of care, okay? So that's what we're after. So we're gonna define morale, and we're gonna find ways to improve it. So if I could get somebody high speed to read my task condition standards, please.
Do morale more better than before.
Yep.
Conditions. Classroom probably it's too hot to do this outside.
Also,
Standards make morale better than it was at your level of responsibility.
thank you very much. I appreciate that. All right. So let's take our best shot at defining morale. That's only your problem for another week. Yes. How do we define morale? Someone give me a best shot. Not an example, a definition. I don't care if you're chewing. Someone's going to answer this question.
Something to bring up the spirits of the soldiers and the people around, just so that way they're having a good time.
Okay.
It makes it enjoyable.
Spirit. Enjoyable. I like spirit. What you got? Okay. Enjoying is a good thing. What else?
I'd say the level of positive attitude that you had at work while you're at work.
Good attitude. Okay, great. Yeah, that's not bad. If you guys know me, I love going into the deep magic and finding those obscure Army definitions for things. Just like empathy, the Army also has defined morale. So I would like somebody who's decently literate to read this for me out loud in a commanding voice, please. I said decently, I qualified.
Morale is the mental and emotional condition of an individual or group with regard to the function or task at hand. It is, in a sense, of common purpose with respect to a group as an esprit de corps, which consists of feelings of loyalty, enthusiasm, and devotion people have toward their organization. Morale measures how people feel about themselves, their team, and their leaders. The importance of morale is reflected in federal law, mandating that all commanding officers and others in authority in the Army are required to promote and safeguard morale of the officers and enlisted persons under their command or charge. Section 350 or 3583 Title 10 U.S. Code. Competent leaders know that morale holds a team together and sustains it in operations. Units with high morale tend to be more effective in operations and respond to hardship and losses better.
Thank you very much. So that's from ADP 6-22, which covers Army leadership. Yes, it's my third favorite document. I'll let you guess what the other two are. Now, what stood out to you in this definition? The Army tends to make things more difficult than it needs to be, so it's a little gobbledygook-ish. Because we captured the spirit and the feeling of enjoyment, so we did a really good job. But what stood out to you in this?
I'd say loyalty.
Okay.
The word loyalty, it's kind of interesting to see that in there. Surprising, but once you think about it, not really surprising, because if you ask a soldier to go do X, Y, and Z, if they have a high morale, they're more likely to do the job and to do it correctly,
Right.
and to be loyal to the team or to the unit and to accomplish the mission.
Great.
And maybe even beyond what you ask them to do. Whereas if they don't feel those feelings of loyalty because they lack morale, they just don't care, they don't want to be there.
Yeah.
They're going to be reluctant to perform the job or to do it at all. They may say, "Yeah, sorry, I got it done."
Yeah.
And it never got done at all.
Very good. Yeah, the thing, go ahead and grab you some breakfast, it's okay. The good thing about, or the interesting thing about this is morale has something to do with, and you captured this with loyalty, has something to do with an organization bigger than just yourself. Motivation is your individual capacity to do something. Morale is a team's ability to do something, right? So already we've started to identify that being part of something bigger is part of it. Now, what stood out to me on this is this really weird dichotomy between, one, the United States Code making it mandatory that leaders measure and improve morale, but two, it's all based off of feelings. Now, as a leader, that kind of makes me nervous, right? I want a leadership task that has a number and a metric to it, right? I want an Excel spreadsheet that has red blocks that I can turn green based on data. But how, as a leader, do I wade into this realm of people's feelings? Is anyone else daunted by that task? It's a lot, right? You are responsible for other people's feelings. And soldiers tend not to be people of great attitudes, generally. We're kind of a bad attitude culture, which is great. It's kind of how we get the job done. I did go and look up the United States Code to make sure that this is true, that that's really what it says, and this is what the United States Code says. So this is a stronger authority than the UCMJ, because the UCMJ is based off of us having the United States Code. And it does indeed say that in the Army, specifically, all commanding officers and others in authority are required to take all necessary and proper measures under the laws, regulations, and customs of the Army to promote and safeguard morale. Did you know that? Before you put on stripes or bars or dots, that you would be required to take all necessary and proper measures to both promote and safeguard morale. So what does that mean when you've done the opposite of that? You've broken the law. So the JAG building is right next door, and you were all on lockdown. Okay, but does that, for any of you, make you take this idea a little bit more seriously? This is part of what's expected of you in leadership. Here are just some other aspects of morale that I just thought of myself. This is not an all-encompassing list. Just some things that I was thinking of that morale includes. And a lot of it has to do with attitude. Especially this one, the subordination of self-interest, right? Because it's the dynamic of belonging to a team. I always say, the number one thing the Army creates, it's not bombs and it's not corpses, it's teams. That is the thing we make better than anybody else on the planet. So, answer this question for me based off of this. Who is responsible for morale?
Commanding officers and people in positions of authority.
True, but get more specific, Sergeant Silvers.
That's what it said.
Who is responsible?
Just like an everyone question. Everyone.
How about I am responsible. And you own it. So what are some things that promote morale? Right? Your first duty is to promote morale. How do you promote morale? Chick-fil-A helps, right? It's a good start, right? But, yes.
Recognizing their achievements.
Good. I really like that. Yes, recognizing the achievements of others. Awesome. What else?
I would say kind of checking in daily with the junior soldiers.
Good.
And kind of see where they're at. They're at the lowest level.
Good.
And
Yeah.
seeing what you can do to kind of lift that soldier up. Because as you lift one up, he might entrust that loyalty to partners and his his friends,
Right.
peers next to him, and then that intends to do a lot better as well.
Promote ahead of peers. Absolutely right.
Knowing your soldiers, knowing
Good.
if they're married, knowing what
Yeah.
they're going through at the moment, and like you talked about checking up on them,
Yeah.
seeing where they are with whatever's going on, and their spouse is having issues, their kids having issues. Hey, are those still problems?
Yeah.
Do we need to ask for Sergeant Commander about them? You know, maybe they're
There's
going
plenty of
to
breakfast left,
military
yes.
facility
Easy.
right now for care or something. That's a problem.
Good. Very good. Who remembers my 4 magic questions for monthly counseling? Anybody remember them? I told you to write them down. Memorize them. How are your relationships? How are your finances? How is your behavioral health? And how are we helping you achieve your career goals? I thoroughly believe if those questions were asked at every monthly counseling session, the Army would be significantly improved, because if you know where your soldiers are at in those dynamics, you can predict problems before they become critical issues. So thank you. Okay, good. Yes, I believe a lot of those things raise morale. We're going to talk about them specifically. But it's more than just any one dynamic, right? Because if your command is just being awful to you and overworking you for no reason and not recognizing your achievements and being rude all the time, but then they go, but I gave you a pizza party. Is your morale going to be improved by the pizza party? Maybe temporarily. Yeah, moment perhaps, right? But if the overall culture isn't changed, right? If the culture isn't changed, then that one element is going to be useless, right? It's going to be just a drop in inertia. Good. All right, so what are the things that lower morale? What lowers morale?
I think pretty simply not being empathetic to situations they're in that moment they're not going to be able to provide you any positive work at all, right?
Yes.
And then kind of negative I expect them to continue to go.
Good. I think especially a selfish culture, right? A selfish culture would be the thing. What'd you have?
Not providing purpose.
Good.
So like, hey, the reason we're working late on Thursday afternoon is so
Very
you
good.
guys can get out early tomorrow and get on Friday.
Yes. Expert level response. Put a pin in that. We're going to come back to that one. That one's very good. Yes, true. Completely true. I always say, you know, under the wrong circumstances, doing something like an obstacle course or, you know, an FTX can be miserable, but are those things themselves miserable? No, those things can be awesome, right? Those things can be a ton of fun. When I was in the reserves a long time, and most of the reserves, if you've been in the reserves, is people just sitting on their phone all weekend Well, like one or two people have to like figure out how to schedule their dentist appointment. And the leaders thought they were like being positive by not overloading soldiers with doing too many things. And I'm like, no, these people joined the army. They want to do army things. If you make them crawl in the mud on their weekend, I promise you that will be fun for them. They can sit on their phone at any time. We joined the army to blow things up and do cool things. So it's not necessarily the things. All right, so what does positive morale gain us as an organization? What are the benefits?
Less headaches.
Yeah, sure.
Motivation.
Yeah. What else?
I mean, cohesiveness as a group.
Yeah, it's true.
You get performance without having to micromanage, because people are happy to be there, they're just gonna do their job and do the whole.
Yeah, absolutely. What else?
They can provide some buy-in.
Buy-in's great. Yeah. Okay. This is just one thing I found online. Morale makes an organization safer, and what I mean safer is safer to take risks. You want soldiers to take risks by giving their ideas and putting themselves out there, right? Leading. If morale is low because leadership is rude, then a E3 who wants to get promoted someday will be less apt to try their hand at leading PRT, which is a skill they're going to need someday. But if it's a supportive command that supports each other even when we make mistakes or don't do things perfectly, then that PFC feels like it's safer to try, right, to get out there and try their hand at a leadership skill that's the next level up for them. Does that make sense? So that's kind of the idea. Some other things we get more collaboration, sharing credit, being more candid. You want people to be candid. If there's problems, you want to know about them, right? What was it that General Powell said, when soldiers stop coming to you with your issues, that's when you know you failed. This is from Speed of Trust by Stephen Covey. Morale makes things more efficient. Efficiency is huge for us. We are a giant bureaucracy. This is like the largest single organization, and we move slowly. We are a blob of inefficiency. So the more things we can speed up, the better things are, so we can move on and get to the next task. I think what's even less efficient than wearing a combat belt in a combat zone is wearing your PT belt over your PT uniform that already has reflective leathers. But that's just me. Morale retains talent. Now, you might not care about that the lower rank you are, but the higher you get, the more you see how important that is. That leaders are entrusted with like hundreds of thousands of dollars of Army funds management when you were given a soldier, because that soldier has been invested in to be trained and equipped. And if you, as an individual leader, are making that soldier's life so miserable that they want to get out, you've wasted the Army's money. Now, not everybody has to stay forever, but if somebody would have stayed otherwise, then that's on you, right? And when you're really short-staffed, then that becomes a bigger issue when you start to notice that the higher you get. Do you believe that that's true? Okay, good. All right. So once again, let me ask, where do you fit in with all this? Where do you fit in? This is not a trick question. It's your responsibility to promote and safeguard morale. Now, who remembers about 11 months ago taking a paper-based morale survey? Who remembers? If you were here 11 months ago. If you weren't, you don't have to answer my question. So it came out in a tasker from battalion that 100% of the battalion would take a paper-based survey on morale. Now, I purposefully did not put out a lot of information about that survey first. I wanted to see, because I was new to the unit, I wanted to see how our leadership communication worked with a tasking like this. And people have opinions on surveys, right? They're like, oh, surveys don't get you anything, they're stupid, I don't understand this. Now I will say, Bravo did a really good job. I got like over 90% of responses back. Alpha gave me like 11 or 22, just something totally silly about that. And that was because the command team at the time did not have a high opinion of surveys, and they didn't know me. But rather than those leaders taking the time to get some buy-in and ask, hey Chappy, what's with this task we have to do? I could have explained it to them. They just blew it off, and you'll see that result in the data. But we took a survey. Now that survey is pseudo-scientific, based off of some research I had done in an organization that studies morale in large corporations, and they found that there are 8 measurable dynamics of morale that can be individually worked on, that if these dynamics are improved, increase the overall strategy. And we'll go over each one of these. So the reason I'm doing this class is in about a month or so, we're going to do that survey again. And I would like to see that morale has improved over time. And we also have had some command changeover, or we will soon, and I want to be able to deliver a product to those new command teams to say, here is what morale looks like in your organization. Take a month and work on one of these a month, or every 2 months, and you should see some improvement. So that is our strategy. That is what we're here for, okay? Silly hat day is not going to be the thing that fixes morale, having a cohesive strategy. So we're going to go over what that survey looked like. So this is what it looked like. Simple questions, 8 questions based off of those 8 dynamics, easily measured. My unit either does this a little or a lot. And we're going to go over these individually. I'm really sad that only like 2 people raised their hand at taking this. This is the product that I created at the end of that, which shows how morale looks in the big picture. I had all the data to break it down to the company level, to the platoon level, as things that you could actually work on. And then I gave the battalion commander, when he came in, I handed him this paper on our first meeting and said, here's your battalion. This is what their morale looks like. We got a fair score across the battalion. This top section up here you can see is how much participation I got by section. And you can see alphas, I got almost no participation. Now what you'll see when we look at the results, I think I have the results on there as well, they reported extremely high morale. Well, 11 people took that. So would I confidently say I feel like alpha's morale is good? No, I wouldn't. I got bad data, right? And so I can't do anything for them if they don't give me good data. Now what I want to happen is at the end of this, I'm going to create a new one of these, and if it goes down to the platoon level, platoons can take the opportunity to improve these things individually. I'm already seeing this in HSC Motor Pool, where they chose communication, and they have an intentionally weekly communication training session that they do to just foster a culture of open communication about issues, about cool ideas, and I've seen them do this now for a month. And the buy-in has increased dramatically. So I don't expect you to take on the whole project at once, but to pick one dynamic. Okay, is everyone bought onto the idea? Okay, so before we get into this, please eat more food. Does anybody have any questions before we get into the 8 dynamics? Seriously, take more food. I'm not taking any home.
If you got issues disposing of it, I don't mind disposing.
Good, sir. How are you? I'll get your notes.
What's it's in 4 minutes? Is that the time?
All right, let's move this thing along. By all means, keep getting food, but I don't want to keep you too long.
I know this, we're missing a couple platoons.
That's the data that I received.
We're missing motor pool, we're missing
Good enough. Then this will improve.
remember I asked you like where was this part when you were presenting it? They're on but this
All right, so let's get into the first of the dynamics. The first one is mission focus, which has to do with the soldiers understand the clarity of the mission, do they accept that the mission is valuable? And the question is, I understand my unit's mission and accept that it's worth doing. Which all comes down to the idea of why. Why are we doing this? Now, I came from a generation of soldiers. I came in the Army in 2007, a billion years ago, as a young enlisted specialist right here at Fort Stewart. It was my first unit. And back then, the culture was very much against the idea of soldiers asking why. And I can understand that. The culture has changed, that there is a time and a place for why. And in fact, the Army has always believed in providing the why. Do you know why I know that? Because I know some people doubt me when they hear that. I know some old school NCOs, or some NCOs who are hiding behind little dots, believe that this is a very bad idea for the culture of the Army. What is the Army's definition of leadership?
That you provide purpose, motivation, and direction.
Purpose, direction, and motivation. So can you provide the purpose of a mission without a why? No, you absolutely cannot. And this is not a new Army idea. This has been the Army definition of leadership for longer than I've been. Now there's a time and a place, right? I use this analogy all the time. If you're in combat and there are bullets flying and you say, soldier duck, that is not the time to ask why. Right? That is the time to duck. That is the time to comply immediately. If we're all at the motor pool and we just finished repacking our Connex and then we get told, hey, we gotta unpack it again, and we're not really going anywhere, we're just gonna be doing this, that's an okay time to explain why. Now sometimes, cause I told you so, is fine. It really is. The Army has a legally binding rank structure. The Army's legally binding rank structure guarantees, ultimately, by the force of violence, compliance. Right? There is ultimately a bottom line that, based off of the rank structure, soldier, you will either comply or you will face punishment from the United States government. Right? But my biggest bullet point from the last class is that trust is the speed between command and compliance. If the soldier trusts you, you've created a culture that the soldier trusts your leadership, that speed of compliance will come faster and easier. Does anybody disagree with that statement? Trust is the currency that makes the Army move quickly. And so providing that purpose, direction, motivation is part of it. And so, I don't know, I haven't been a leader for a long time. Are we still doing TLPs? So receiving the mission as the leader and giving out the mission, that's the first couple of steps, right? So if you as a leader aren't doing those first two steps of providing that mission, then what's the point? So the mission, though, it has to be coherent, it has to make sense. It has to be significant. You have to think that this is actually going to impact the world. It's not fruitless. And that it has a purpose to the individual. The mission has to be coherent. Why do I have pine cones up there? Well, because a million years ago, when I was a young specialist here in Fort Stewart, you know that big field that's over by Wynn, where they have like the Go America parties and Oktoberfest? So one day, my platoon alone, out of the entire battalion, was tasked to go remove all of the pine cones off of that field. I don't know if you've seen that field. There's a lot of pine trees on that field. And it was a particularly windy day, so the trees were swaying. And what happens when rickety old trees with pine cones on them sway in the wind? More pine cones drop. And so Speckless Corn, having a particularly bad attitude, decided to go on a comedic rant about how stupid it was that we're picking up pine cones. If the sergeant major really wanted me to get rid of all the pine cones, he'd just let me get rid of the trees. And then everybody who was with me all turned just white as ghosts. And I said, Sergeant Major's behind me, isn't he? And he was. Sergeant Major was behind me, and he said, Specialist Corn, rather than giving you an axe and letting you fulfill your dream of taking down all the trees in this field, I'm actually going to give you the explanation as to why you're doing this seemingly meaningless task. He said, Specialist Corn, I expect one day you'll be Sergeant Corn. I was, not because I was a particularly good leader, but because I called cadence really well, and so that was enough for my first sergeant. But he said, I'm going to give you the real leadership reason as to why this platoon only, is picking up pine cones in this useless Sisyphean task. Your platoon, more than any other in the battalion, has had a really big issue with discipline and DUIs. And you're not contributing to the overall battalion's effort at being a cohesive team. And because the platoon itself is not very cohesive. And so you're given this task, one, because you have lack of discipline, and we need to sweat out some of that lack of discipline. And two, I would rather that y'all hate me together than just be a bunch of individuals. And so when I went to my promotion board, the sergeant major, same sergeant major, asked me why would be a good reason to make one platoon we have all the pine cones. And I gave him back the exact answer he gave me, and it stuck to me to that day. And sometimes there are meaningless tasks in the Army, right? Sometimes there are. Sometimes we do need to flip over the rock so they can get evenly tanned on both sides. Right? But that's because we're not just a bunch of people who work in cubicles in a bank who have completely separate lives. We are fully integrated teams, so we need to learn to think like teams. So the mission, even the dumbest missions, have to have some coherence to them. And they need to be significant. When I was in Korea, I went to this emergency medical ministry course. Amazing class, really fascinating. We did a lot of cool stuff. But one of the things we did, if you've ever been to Korea, have you noticed how Korea is completely flat like Kansas? No, it's not at all, right? It's extremely ridiculously hilly. And we spent a lot of time in the emergency medical ministry course doing litter carries and buddy drags up these stupid hills. And I absolutely hated it. I thought it was miserable. They took us up this one particularly large hill. They put our heaviest friends in full mock gear, and we were in full mock gear, and we had to buddy drag our buddies up these hills. We got to the top of the hill, and standing at the top of the hill was an old Korean War veteran who told the story of a time that a chaplain had to drag 20 soldiers up that very hill while they were being chased by the Chinese. A real life story. And this guy was still pretty well connected with the Army community, and he said, and this is why you all do this event called the Sprint Drag Carry in your ACFT. Because there may be a day where you're going to need to drag or carry, like kettlebells, a litter up a ridiculously stupid hill. And all of a sudden, my least favorite event in the ACFT made a lot more sense. Right? That became significantly more significant. And then purpose. You have to make the mission make sense to that individual. Does that make sense? Bravo didn't do terrible on mission focus. This was at a time when y'all were pretty separated. There were folks who were doing the mission in those little secret boxes, like all by themselves at nighttime. We were separated from everybody else, and you know, it was harder to get an idea of a cohesive mission for this company. Alpha, their mission is pretty easy, right? They put nerds in planes, they fly planes, and then they land planes. Like that's what they do over and over again. It's easy to describe that mission. If you are working in the motor pool in HSC, you might not have any idea why you do those tasks every day. Why are we so worried about rolling stock in a fixed-wing aviation unit that has an enduring strategic mission, right? So it's incumbent on leaders to provide that mission focus. How do you provide that mission focus better? This is not just chaplain giving out leadership information. There's a lot of leadership in this room that I'd like to cross-level. How do you make mission focus better in your team or squad level.
By going through the missions they have to complete, we're actually doing
Good. Yeah. What? Yeah. Check.
By helping them understand their scope and impact.
Good. What if you receive the mission and you're like, what are those stupid battalion people doing? This mission doesn't make any sense. This is stupid. What if that's your attitude?
Unfortunately, there's a lot of them that do that.
Yeah.
And so that doesn't help them morale.
Yeah.
Automatically, they're complaining and then you're not helping the morale up, so the soldiers will mirror
Good.
the way that you are treating the situation.
Yeah. Yeah, let me tell you, this is something that I've learned. I've been in the Army for almost 17 years at this point. And when I was a young specialist, I thought that only demons worked at battalion. And then I started working at battalion level, and I said, only evil witches work at brigade. And I started working at brigade, and I said, I'm not going to carry on this. Every time I get to a new echelon in the Army, I learn that there are generally good and reasonably competent people working at every level. But because we're such a giant bureaucracy, sometimes those communication layers break down. And they tend to break down, this is just my time and experience, they tend to break down at that platoon sergeant, platoon leader level, where they adopt this attitude of those idiots up there in the sky, they don't know what they're doing, they're stupider than us. And that becomes a cancer that metastasizes downward. The best thing to do when you don't understand the mission as a leader is to clarify it properly. That makes sense. And just as a kind of advanced leadership technique, you may win a little bit, a couple of points with your soldiers in the moment by saying, oh, those bozos at battalion. You might win a little bit in the short term, but in the long term, you damage the credibility of the entire organization. So just keep that in mind. You'll see that the longer you're in. All right. I don't want to take too much time. The next one is problem-solving efficacy. Our problems, and I mean like individual soldier problems, are problem solved. People trust that my organization is going to solve my problems. We can see that Bravo did really poorly on this one. This one was not good. Now imagine you are a young PFC Lopez, who just moved here from Korea. I'm not going to give her entire story, but she had a finance issue when she arrived. And she was not getting the right pay. Now, if PFC Lopez didn't work for such an amazing leader, let's say she was an infantry soldier in a force comm brigade, would she be able to manage that finance issue by going directly to finance people herself and getting the problem solved? No, right? You have to stand for arrest to your corporal, who has to stand for arrest to their, E6, and try to get this problem solved by getting a pack slip, by going to S1 and waiting for them to talk to finance. Now, when you're that E6 or whatever, you're tracking this finance problem, but you've seen First Sergeant pass by 2 or 3 times without bringing it up. Meanwhile, PFC is starving, eating popcorn and peanut butter, waiting for that finance issue to get solved. And you saw Sergeant Major and you thought, well, I could have brought it up, but I don't really want to bug him right now. Am I painting a picture? Now, I've been a leader. I understand sometimes those things take time. But if the PFC believes that you don't care about their problem, right, that is going to drastically shred them around. Now, can we solve every finance problem immediately? Of course not. That is a ridiculous organization, and for some reason they only hire civilians that hate us. I don't know why, right? But that leader needs to show that that leader cares about that problem as much as soldier does, and has provided realistic expectations and realistic suspenses, right? You have to manage the anxiety of that soldier. You say, soldier, I know you're going through a hard time. We can talk about maybe doing an AAR grant or something, but in the meantime, I do have a sit-down schedule with Sergeant Major in 3 days. I'm not going to bug Sergeant Major before that, but that's the soonest I could get in. Hey, I put a RFI up through S1. If I don't hear back in 3 days, I'll check up on it again, right? Something like that. Something showing that level of competence and care. Who has some thoughts on that? How about pushback? Leaders, got any pushback for me?
I think that's so low because it's like a never changing target for us, and the processes are changing. and then that doesn't communicate down to the lowest levels. So it's hard for us to stay on top of that.
Yeah.
And actually give realistic goals to the soldiers. And I know that our team has been really good about ironing out the processes on the way forward. But I know when I got here, it seemed like there's always a different target, and we couldn't meet it because we didn't know where it was.
Yeah. Now keep in mind, right? This leadership class is for how you as a leader can solve morale under your umbrella of responsibility. So you can't fix all the problems above you, right? So I need you to not fix every problem, but show that you care about every problem and that you are competent enough to do your piece of that management. And sometimes that is influencing upward to a battalion or whatever to say, hey, your process seems kind of confusing. Can you explain it to me and take some recommendations, or whatever the case may be. And y'all are in a difficult situation. Being away from the flagpole, not being part of Third ID itself, that does create some problem-solving issues. But what in your level of responsibility, maybe just as an E5 or a corporal, what can you do to solve the morale? Not the problem, solve the morale. How can you solve the morale problem with problem-solving efficacy at an E5 level?
Being empathetic and then continuing to check up on a situation like that.
Promote workers, absolutely. Very good. Empathetic and competent, that's what I'm looking for, right? That empathetic piece, that was based off of my last empathy class, I'll teach that again in a little while if you missed it, and that competence piece. I don't know if we still do leaders books. You still do leaders books, right? I always had my soldier issues pages as the second page of my leader book. First page being privacy act statement. The first actual page should be soldier issues. So you can show issue, name, suspense, last checked on, last checked on, last checked on. So I could manage my soldiers' anxiety by saying, hey, I got you, this is where I'm at. You know, you are free to use commander's open door policy. I'll support you in that endeavor, right? It's about managing that with care. Very good. I can go on that one forever, I can't. I really can't, because it's Friday. Communication efficacy, the quality of speaking and listening vertically and horizontally. I trust that my unit will hear my feedback and is communicating downward quickly and correctly. So y'all did pretty well in this. Pretty well in this one. Again, don't trust Alpha's numbers. Those numbers are garbage. I don't expect anybody really to break out of that 70s range, okay? So communication efficacy. Are you, when the Army's definition of leadership says leaders provide purpose, direction, and motivation, that's great, but you have to be able to provide it. That means you have to communicate it. That means you have to get it from your brain, through your mouth, or signal to soldier's brain, right? So are you able to do that? Is your method of communication clear? Is it consistent? And is it cost effective? What do you think I mean by is our communication cost effective? So different communication styles, right, take different amounts of effort, and from both the hearer and the communicator. So for example, I have the ability to yell at PFC Lopez because she did not put the food in the order I wanted it to be. I could really have seen her better putting the sandwiches on the other side and the coffee on the other side, and I can communicate that by locking her up and screaming in her face. Or, perhaps less costly, I could say, hey, I'm going to use the Army systems and AAR next time let's put, I'm just kidding, I don't know. Next time let's put the food on the other side, right? Or how about the ever immortal conversation of are we using signal too much in the Army? Who thinks we use signal too much? You know, all the old people, I got it. You didn't have to put your hand up. I understood that. Right? You get that signal beep at 1930 saying, you know, remember to bring your gloves to formation, whatever the case may be in the morning. That's valuable, though, because what did we do before signal? We did formations. Yeah, we did not let people go because there was nothing to do at 14:30. We kept them just in case, because something might come out, right, until the last possible minute. So there is a payoff with this. Now, me personally, I do just get that just immediate rebellious stress when I see a stupid signal thing come out at 2000, even if it's innocuous. I'm like, what are you doing? I don't want to think about you. You don't exist right now. Okay, I don't care. But is it better than a formation? Maybe. right? And so that's a leadership conversation at your level. Who has thoughts on communicating? Who's got some good leadership techniques for how to improve communication in their little umbrella?
So, group chats are not for everything.
They should just be for me.
In the headquarters for platoon chat, when someone signs out on leave at midnight, everyone in the platoon gets a message saying so-and-so signed out, staff needs to notify.
We're gonna hash out.
I don't care that someone went on leave at midnight. We have the troops to task. The platoon sergeant, the platoon leader, everyone knows that that person is going on leave. You can ask them, hey, did you sign out on leave? Or not, because it's all in FSA now, so whether they signed out or not, they're still getting charged today. So, it's one of those, like, not everything has to be a group message. If you've got to text your first line, just let them know that, hey, I made my flight, I'll be back in 2 weeks. And that's a message for your first line, you can tell your platoon sergeant,
With that, that's good, thank you. Maybe less about specific modalities of communication, but more about a culture of communication. Right? How do we create a better culture where we as leaders are receiving good communication from soldiers below us, or we are providing communication in a more efficient manner that they actually hear what I'm actually saying?
Yeah, with that, I think what helped me out a lot is actually making time to go communicate with my soldiers. So a lot of times we get caught up in the day-to-day, and a lot of times it might seem easier with a text or a signal, but I think it's a much better way to communicate when you actually see them and interact with them.
Good.
So, but making that time and actually making yourself available is an important thing.
Good. Yeah.
It's very hard to provide sometimes the full context and purpose of something through Signal without writing a novel that everybody has to read. I think your knee-jerk reaction should be to talk to everybody in person if possible, and then use those chats for like last-minute updates, like, oh, it's gonna be 9:15 instead of 9:30.
Yeah.
But you should be able to put out most things, strive to, during the duty day, person to person with your soldiers.
Yeah. Email was initially designed just to be small memo information, just tiny bits of data. But it's grown over time, becoming much more inclusive, right, form of communication. I think Signal's the same thing. It should probably just be data, little bits of data, right? Good, okay.
I
Yes.
just want to make, bring something up just with the Signal that was brought up to me this week that I think is a good learning for everybody. But we had the promotion board this week, right? And like the battalion last minute at 2000 or whatever pushed out that the show time is at 9:30, right? And I know our soldiers showed up at
7:15.
7:15, and they're already nervous, you know, stressed out about the promotion board, and then they show up at the wrong time, so that's causing more stress. So unnecessary, right?
Yeah.
And it's so easy because it was a promotion board. We scheduled it. We known about it.
Yeah.
Why change it last minute?
Yeah. That's that cost-effective question. Very good. All right, we got to keep moving. I could do a class on each of these. Cohesiveness. We talked about this earlier. Is your unit cohesive? Is there a sense of identity and attraction to the unit? Do you belong? Do you want to belong? My unit, my team has an identity that is clear, unique, and attractive. Now, this is one of those things that's more touchy-feely. I think Broadway does great with this. I love morale patches. I love unit logos, right? I love stuff like that. The Army even has a chart. Army's got charts on everything. Army's got a chart on cohesion. Are the peers bonding with each other? Are the peers in the unit bonding with the leader? Is that bubble, that team, that squad bonding with the greater organization? Maybe the battalion, maybe the brigade. And is that organization bonded with the Army? Now, the Army does a really good job at bonding you to the institution, right? We all spent 9 weeks at a Jackson or a Leonard Wood or a SIL, bonding to the institution. I think we do a good job at bonding with peers. Psychologists call that trauma bonding, right? That's why we have dark humor together. Now that leader bonding piece and that organization bonding piece, that's harder. How do you build cohesiveness in your unit? Somebody read that green bubble for me, please.
More than 30% of soldiers reporting to feel socially isolated from their teams, placing them at risk for more mental health problems. Said Lieutenant Colonel Samuel Preston, Chief of Command Behavioral Health Division,
very much. What are your thoughts on that? Isolated hopelessness is the #1 contributor outside of alcohol to suicidality, right? When you don't feel like you matter to anything bigger than yourself, and when you have no hope beyond a certain point, those are the factors that really create massive risk for suicidality. So cohesiveness is more than just having silly unit patches, although I love them. I think it really is the Army's true antidote, which is why all the Army's suicide prevention strategies are talk to your buddy, get them connected to you, form an empathetic connection, right? That is the solution. Now, does that become harder across generations?
Yes.
The Army's culture, I read once a long time ago, changes every 10 years. And I think we're right now at the cusp of a major culture change. If you've been in for more than a decade, you've seen how the Army has changed. And we're really getting into that massive Gen Z culture, but we're still required to create that cohesiveness. So how do you do it? What is successful at your levels? How do we cross-level some of those techniques?
Meeting them where they're at.
Good. What does that mean to you?
Their outlook on either like the Army or the job, whatever. Just kind of showing they can understand whether you agree or not. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Have that feedback with them.
Okay. What else?
Just kind of at a higher level, being able to see the soldier, right? One of the things that we've been doing for families that have given birth to babies and stuff is providing meal trains.
Yeah.
And so that's a good opportunity for them to see, hey, my unit actually cares about me, even though I'm just, going to disappear for 3 or 6 months.
Yeah.
So they're willing to help out.
Yeah, so not only do you want to be a part of this, but are you a part of this already? That's really good. Any others? Look, the Army does this by making us drink the Kool-Aid, okay? And we can be cynical and not want to say the H word and not want to call cadence, but again, ultimately, at the end of the day, you're going to miss that stuff when you're out, okay? Drinking the Kool-Aid, all that weird Army culture stuff is the stuff that binds us over time with one another. So whatever that looks like in your bubble, if it's a different unit patch just for your team or whatever the case may be, leaders need to do that stuff, and that means making it fun and professional. Okay, I want to keep going. I gotta keep going. Resource utilization. Is command using talent properly? Are people, do they understand their lanes? So the question is, I trust that my unit is utilizing people based on their talents and MOS properly to include their time and their specialized training. I think of orderly rooms. This is a really big trap for first sergeants typically, right? You get that really awesome orderly room clerk who just has it all together and things are smoking hot. You want to leave that soldier in place for your entire tenure as a first sergeant, right? But is that the right thing to do? No. In fact, the orderly room situation is really designed to train soldiers from leaving the line mentality to one day it's your first step along the admin path of the bureaucracy of learning how the Army works behind the scenes. So introducing a soldier to things like memos and per stats and whatever else, right? But as a leader, you don't want your stuff to fall apart, so do you want to try somebody out in that position who's not proven, right? But even if that person's great at orderly room, did their recruiter sign them up to be orderly room clerk, or armorer, or boss representative, or whatever, right? No. So this is a leader's prerogative. If you are leaving somebody, if you're always relying on that one super talented soldier in your formation, but not giving the others opportunities to try and fail, then you might be producing results, but you're not leading well, right? And what's the opposite of safeguarding morale? It's being selfish. So if you as a leader are leveraging one super high-speed soldier at the expense of the others, your results may look good, and that'll win you some short-term battles, but you will not gain a reputation of being a good leader over time. Does that make sense? All right. You can see HSC did really bad on that. Ooh, that's embarrassing. People don't want to feel used, right? That's why I have that question on my Chappy's 4 magic questions. How are we helping you meet your career goals? Even if that's getting out of the Army, that might be their career goal. Because we're not just using you to produce results, right? We are stewarding the Army's investment in you as part of our team. Anybody have any thoughts on that? All right, we'll keep going. It's not as sexy as some of the others. This one's tough. Autonomy. Do soldiers and leaders have freedom to act with disciplined initiative? My unit trusts leaders and soldiers at all levels to operate within their tasks without too much oversight. Who here feels micromanaged? You guys close your eyes. It's 100% confidential with your chaplain. I won't tell them. Right? So autonomy is really tough. Nobody wants to feel micromanaged. Nobody wants to feel like their ability, right, to lead or to act is being hampered. Someone read the green bullet for me, please.
Bond largely shapes the degree in which unit members feel comfortable exhibiting initiative and providing input. Leaders create the conditions for initiative by guiding others and thinking through problems for themselves. ADP 6-1.
Very good, thank you. Now, I will say about micromanagement, if you are being micromanaged, the first place you need to look is the mirror. The first place you need to look is in the mirror. Are you failing at inspiring your leader with confidence? And as long as you are sure that you've done everything within your ability, then perhaps you are working for some leader who has a bunch of anxiety and is leading through their anxiety. That's possible. But for an example, I will never read receipt you. But if you get a read receipt from Chappy, why do you think that is happening? Guess.
Bad time.
No, because you blew off my email before. If you blow me off 3 times, you are now in my read receipt category, right? So is that micromanaging? Yes. Is that my fault? No. So there's a balance to that. But I will say, Army leadership philosophy, not everybody knows this. Do you know we don't use command and control anymore as Army doctrine? Who's heard command and control, right? That's actually old. We don't use that anymore. Why? Because leaders, we should not be controlling everybody as like chess pieces, because that slows down the bureaucracy. What do we use instead?
Mission command.
Mission command, thank you. We use mission command, which means we give the overall picture, we put the command out, and then we say, now y'all go. You have been invested and trained, and you have the ability and the resources, hopefully, to go and do the thing. Because otherwise, over the course of the battle, we'll be like, okay, we're supposed to take that hill, but that hill looks better. So, hey, can I take that hill instead of that hill? And then you've lost time, right? You've lost the ability. We want to keep moving. So the Army's leadership philosophy is that leaders should accept 70% as a win. You know that? If you're always forcing your team to stop until they reach 100% of perfection, then you're not moving fast enough to achieve victory. If your soldier provides you with a 70% solution, you retrain at the AAR, right? I'm not saying we're always just C- people, but you take that as a win and you keep going. Does that make sense? Now, this is a leadership class. This is not a fellowship class. So the skill for the leader is how to get over your anxiety about what I just said. Because who as a leader wants to accept 70%? If your soldiers are consistently giving you 70%, is that their failure or your failure? Ultimately, it's the leader's failure, right? You either didn't provide the purpose, direction, motivation, the training, or the resources. And you can say, well, the enemy has a say in it. Okay, well, intel is a resource. Okay? This is a leadership class. So providing autonomy is strengthening soldiers. Think of it like using crutches. If you're using crutches forever, your legs will start to become less strong. If you are micromanaging forever, your soldiers will not grow into the leader you need them to be to get stuff done. And these people don't want to do everything, probably. All right, who's got thoughts on autonomy? How do we improve autonomy as leaders within our umbrella of leadership?
You allow people to make mistakes, great. And then you don't publicly rebuke them for it.
Very good. Yes. You correct through training. A new revision to an ATP just got released in February. I'm going to turn into my next class. ATP 6-22.1. Who's read it? Just released in February. It's bomb. Okay, it's a leadership supplement on the difference between teaching, coaching, and mentoring. And I'm going to turn that in my next class because I think it's really important. There's a time to teach, there's a time to coach, and there's a time to mentor. Right? Coaches sometimes need to yell and get in your face and, you know, hit you with pewter sticks. Sometimes that's a necessary skill, but sometimes mentoring is a necessary skill, and the wisdom of leadership is knowing when to make those changes. So very good, thank you. Any other thoughts on the timing? Well, we are on the last one. Next. Good. Adaptation and innovation. Oh no, there's two more. I'll go fast. Adaptation and innovation. Are we allowing soldiers the ability to adapt and innovate? Are we allowing soldiers to come up with good ideas? Up armored high Humvees. Do you know what rank of soldier came up with the idea to strap broken enemy armor pieces to our Humvees?
Specialist.
A specialist. This entire battalion, aerial exploitation. Do you know what level of soldier invented the idea of aerial exploitation? Specialists. In Vietnam, our ability to effectively provide artillery through the jungle was extremely hampered. And we've had some outgoing air platforms that were of any value that they were just going to get rid of until an E4, it was actually whatever the tech rank was at the time, said, why don't we use those as our observation posts for our artillery pieces? And that has adapted and grown into what we do as a battalion today. Because a specialist had that good idea. In fact, all the big light infantry brigades now have these little, who's come from Fort Liberty recently? They have these like little cell teams, these little sync teams of people with weird and diverse backgrounds, regardless of your rank, where they just come up with cool ideas for how to use computers. And
so there's the Marne Innovation Center home base.
Yeah, there.
They've got
They stole that from
engineers,
Liberty.
Contractors, and you show up with an idea.
Exactly.
They have the know-how and equipment to make it happen and test it out.
Yep. These are becoming really popular because we, soldiers are coming from all kinds of different backgrounds who do all kinds of different things. Just because you see somebody in this or whatever they're wearing on here, you don't know everything there is to know about them. There could be somebody coming from a farming background who's got some thoughts on field sand that might really make a difference, or whatever the case may be. I came into the Army as an interrogator, is what I did in my enlisted career, and I came in with an acting degree. So I had some thoughts on how to train our interrogators to provide a little bit more realistic, technique based off of where I came from. So you never know. So are we allowing that? Now that can be tough. You're in a very technical, very expensive field, aviation. There's a lot of checks and balances that have to be done, so you can't innovate on everything, but sometimes people have good ideas. So are you allowing those good ideas to flourish? This is my favorite, and this is the last one. Power equalization is the command's ability to utilize power, to share power, and to delegate. My unit does not abuse power and delegates authority to the appropriate levels. So is your unit just, fair, legal, and moral, right? If you are in a unit where two lieutenants both get into a DUI on the same weekend, but one of them is the commander's best buddy and that one doesn't get any punishment, is morale going to be affected by that? Absolutely, right? We cannot have corruption. We used to call that toxic leadership. Now what do we call it? Yeah, that's right. Counterproductive leadership. I have personally helped 2 battalion commanders find new paths in life due to counterproductive leadership, because I take this very seriously. For example, commander's open door policy. Is it a proper utilization of your power as a squad leader to say, well, you're allowed to use the commander's open door, but you got to inform me first? Now, that's certainly been Army culture forever, but is that door truly open in that case? No. It is absolutely not, right? So we have to make sure that we are utilizing the power that we're entrusted with appropriately. Who has thoughts on this? Now there's a difference between things being fair and things being just. Things aren't always going to be fair, right? I have 2 children, one is 10 and one is 4, and my daughter, the oldest, complains that things aren't fair all the time. Why? Because every time my son pees on the potty, I give him a piece of candy. And my daughter says, well, I'm going to make candy for peeing. Well, it's because you've been doing it well for a very long time, right? No, that's not going to be fair. You're at different levels of development. You're 2 different people. But what I'm doing is legal and ethical and just. So I'm going to continue to bribe my son to pee in the potty. Okay, so, soldiers want things to be fair. Things aren't always going to be fair. And as a leader, you don't have to make things fair. People say stuff like that all the time. It doesn't. One, blame your recruiter, right? You want to have an awesome schedule like your warrant officer and say, by all means, go be a warrant officer. You can have that. But things do need to be just. Are things just? Anybody have any thoughts on that? Awesome. All right. So what is your part in all of this? You're going to improve your foxhole, right? You're going to make your tiny umbrella leadership better than when you received it. That's your job. And we're going to do that by working together on this survey. So we're going to do the survey again in a month or so. Please explain it to your soldiers. Please promote it. Please tell soldiers to take it seriously. Please give me those results quickly. And then I will give you back the analyzed data. And then over the course of the next year, before I do it again before leaving here, take one of those bullets every 2 months to work on it creatively with your team. Okay? You're never going to get this thing done if you try to do it all at once, but you're also not going to get it done if you don't do anything. So this is the strategy we're going to go with. Does anybody have any questions? All right, before I release you, I need 3 very wise and impactful thoughts from you on how this course has changed your life, or at least something that you're going to do differently before I release you. I need 3. From someone, people who have not yet spoken. You know who you are. Sum it up. Give me something that's stuck with you. I fed you, so
A good way to improve morale across, that I found to improve morale across whatever section you're in, is to think with the mindset of, I should be training the juniors that are appointed below me to take my job in the future. And in doing that, you teach them how to be empathetic, you teach them how to lead the soldiers and increase that morale, and that will ultimately help the organization across the board.
Great, that's one, very good.
When you're looking at the common theme of it, you're seeing all these different tools and categories. And so if you had to summarize that in one word, I would say being versatile or flexible, because most leaders that I've seen throughout my career, some of them, it's easy to get single-minded because that was something that made them successful, but it won't be tailored to each and everybody. So with that empathy and everything, you have to be mentally and a little bit emotionally flexible to coach, teach, and mentor the people that you're responsible for.
Great, great, very good, very good. One more. Go ahead.
Something on one of the first slides, I think it was in the definition of morale. It said morale is how you feel about yourself, your peers, and your organization. So remember that how you feel about yourself and how you're presenting yourself is going to affect your morale. So do the important things, keep your physical fitness, keep showing up, keep positive attitude, because what you do is going to set an example for everybody around you.
Yes.
It's going to raise everybody else's morale without doing all these things we just talked about from an organizational level. Just work on yourself and how to help improve it as well. And improving your foxhole, take that literally too. Like cleaning up your workspace, keeping things organized, like that's going to affect you and it's going to affect the people who are sharing spaces with you. So yes, all these organizational things are important, but don't forget to work on yourself as well.
Good.
That spreads.
Military barrier. I like it.
Bars.
Absolutely right. Okay. Hey, I have been your chaplain. Thank you for attending class. Please take the rest of this food, and I release you to your leadership. Thank you very much.